The Tale of Vera and the Moonbound Gate. In the land of Alarin, where twin moons painted the skies with silver and violet light, the forests whispered secrets to those who dared listen. Among the villages of Larkmere, nestled between the Silverwood Groves and the Hollow Range, there was a girl named Vera. Her eyes were pale violet, and her dreams were filled with places she had never seen, voices she had never heard, and a gate that pulsed with moonlight. The villagers feared her, for she bore a crescent mark etched into her palm since birth, a sign they believed tied her to the unseen. Her mother, a healer, taught her to listen to the wind and read the stars, but even she grew quiet when Vera spoke of the moonbound gate. The seer Malin once tried to cast the mark away, but the spell unraveled, leaving her voiceless for 3 days. After that, no one dared interfere. Vera grew in silence, sketching the gate she saw in her dreams, always the same, a massive arch of stone, etched with runes that shimmered like frost, standing alone in a clearing that did not exist on any map. She felt the pull of something vast and ancient, and though she was shunned, she carried her visions like a secret flame. One night, when both moons hung full and low, she followed the pull into the Silverwood. The trees parted for her, and the wind carried her steps. She walked for hours, yet never tired. The forest grew stranger trees with bark like glass, flowers that hummed, shadows that watched but did not move. At last, she reached a clearing she had never seen before, and there it stood, the moonbound gate. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in feathers and shadow, with eyes like molten silver. "You are early," it said, voice like wind through bone. "The gate does not open for mortals, not unless they bear the mark." Vera lifted her hand, and the crescent glowed softly. The figure bowed. "Then you are the key." The gate opened not with sound, but with silence, a silence so deep it swallowed the forest's breath. Beyond it lay the Umbra Vale, a realm of twilight where time bent and memory walked beside you. Vera stepped through, and the gate sealed behind her. In the Umbra Vale, she met the forgotten beings, who had once been gods, heroes, and dreamers, now reduced to echoes. They were not dead, but unremembered, their names lost to time. They told her of the shattering, when the veil between worlds had torn and the gate had been sealed to prevent the unseen from devouring reality. But the seal was weakening, the moons grew restless, and only the key could restore the balance. Vera trained among them, learning to wield memory as weapon, silence as shield, and moonlight as song. She learned to walk between moments, to speak in dreams, and to summon light from sorrow. Each lesson cost her a memory. Her mother's face faded. Her name grew distant. She became a vessel of purpose, hollowed by duty. Among the forgotten was Thalen, a warrior who had once led the armies of the Dawnspire. He taught her to fight without striking, to endure without resisting. He saw in her not just a key, but a bridge. They grew close, though neither spoke of love. In the Umbra Vale, love was a memory too costly to keep. Her journey was not only training. She wandered twilight lands, meeting echoes of beasts and ruins of cities erased from mortal history. She walked through halls where stars burned as torches, rivers that carried whispers instead of water, and towers built from forgotten dreams. She learned that the Umbra Vale was not merely a prison for the forgotten, but a mirror of the world showing what might have been had memory endured. The forgotten warned her of the Maw, a creature of hunger and shadow, born from the void between stars. It was the heart of the unseen, the wound that had never healed. They told her it would tempt her, for it could wear her face and speak her voice. And when the time came, she would have to choose, to seal the gate and vanish, or to open it and rule what remained. When the moons aligned and the gate trembled, the forgotten led her to the heart of the Umbra Vale, where silence pressed against the skin. There she faced the Maw. It rose from the void like smoke, shifting until it became her reflection. It spoke in her voice, wore her face, and offered her a choice. "Seal the gate," it said, "and you will vanish. No songs will remember you, no stars will bear your name, or let it open and you shall rule what remains." Vera stood silent. Then she sang a song of wind and silverwood, of laughter and violet eyes, of a girl who once dreamed of gates. The song became light, the light became blade, and the blade struck true. The gate sealed. The unseen recoiled. The Umbravel sighed. Vera was gone. But in Larkmere, when the moons are full and the wind is still, children say they hear a song in the trees, a song of wind and silverwood, a song of the girl who walked through the gate. Some say Thalin still walks the edge of the Umbravel, waiting for the gate to open once more. Others believe Vera became part of the moons themselves, watching over the world she saved, and in the deepest parts of the Silverwood, where no path remains, the gate still stands, waiting for the next dreamer to find it. And so the legend endures, carried not in memory but in whispers, not in names but in songs. For though Vera is forgotten, her silence shapes the world still. The moons shine brighter when her tale is told, and the Silverwood bends its branches as if listening. The gate waits, patient as stone, knowing that one day another child will bear the mark, another dreamer will walk the path, and the cycle will begin again. The Chronicle of Ilarion, the Forest that Remembers. In the northern reaches of the continent of Varelia, where the winds howl like wolves and the mountains pierce the sky like jagged teeth, there lies a forest older than memory. It is called Ilarion, and it is said to remember everything, every footstep, every whisper, every lie. The trees do not speak, but they listen. The moss does not move, but it watches, and the forest does not forget. Few dared enter Ilarion, and fewer returned. But one winter, a boy named Kyle, born in the border village of Brindlehollow, crossed its threshold. He was 17, with hair like raven feathers and eyes the color of stormlight. His father had vanished into the forest 5 years prior, chasing rumors of a lost relic, the Heartwood crown, said to grant dominion over memory itself. Kyle's mother had begged him not to follow, but the pull of blood and mystery was stronger than fear. Kyle entered Ilarion with nothing but a satchel of dried meat, a silver dagger, and a journal filled with his father's notes. The forest greeted him with silence. No birds sang, no wind stirred. The trees loomed like sentinels, their bark etched with symbols older than language. As he walked, the forest shifted. Paths rearranged, landmarks vanished. Time bent, he marked his trail with stones, but they disappeared when he looked back. On the third day, he met a woman named Liss. She wore a cloak of woven leaves and eyes like amber flame. She claimed to be a warden, one of the few who had been chosen by Ilarion to walk its depths without being consumed. She spoke in riddles and walked without sound. "The forest remembers your father," she said, "but it does not forgive." Liss led Kael to the Grove of Echoes, where the trees whispered fragments of memory. There, Kael saw visions, his father kneeling before a great tree, offering blood to its roots, a crown of twisted branches hovering above a pool of moonlight, a voice deep and ancient saying, "To rule memory is to lose yourself." The Heartwood crown, Liss explained, was not a relic of power, but a burden. It had been crafted by the first Dreambinder, a sorcerer who sought to preserve the world's stories. But memory is not meant to be caged. The crown had warped him, turning his thoughts into vines, his regrets into thorns. He had become the Hollow King, and the forest had sealed him away. Kael insisted on continuing. He believed his father had found the crown and become trapped. Liss warned him, "If you seek him, you must offer something the forest cannot refuse." Kael thought of his mother's lullabies, the scent of her bread, the way she smiled when he returned from the fields. He offered his name. The forest accepted. From that moment, Kael was nameless. The trees parted, revealing the hollow spire, a tower of bark and bone rising from the earth like a wound. Inside, time unraveled. He saw his father, older and twisted, seated upon a throne of roots. His eyes were hollow. His voice was a whisper. "I remember everything," he said, "and it is too much." Kael wept. He tried to pull the crown from his father's brow, but the roots clung to flesh. The forest groaned. The memories surged. Kael saw wars he had never fought, loves he had never known, deaths he had never mourned. The crown tried to bind him, to make him its next vessel, but Kael had no name. He was a blank page. The memories could not cling. He shattered the crown with his dagger, forged from silver mined beneath the forgetting hills. The tower collapsed. The forest screamed. And then, silence. Liz found him in the ruins. "You are free," she said, "but you are forgotten." Kael returned to Brindle Hollow, but no one knew him. His mother did not recognize his face. His home was occupied by strangers. He wandered the world, nameless, faceless, but free. And in the deepest parts of Alarion, where the trees still whisper, they speak of the boy who broke the crown. They do not say his name. They only remember his silence. The Song of the Hollow Star. In the world of Elthar, where the sky was a living tapestry of drifting constellations and the land pulsed with ancient magic, there was a legend older than the spoken word. It was whispered by the wind, etched into the bones of mountains, and carried in the dreams of children. It told of a star that had fallen not from the heavens, but from memory itself. They called it the Hollow Star, and it was said to sing only to those who had been forgotten. The story begins in the cliffside city of Virith, where towers rose like petrified waves and streets shimmered with salt and starlight. There lived a girl named Senra, born to a family of archivists who kept the histories of kings, wars, and gods. But Senra was different. She did not remember her own birth, nor her parents' faces, nor the lullabies that should have shaped her dreams. She was a child of gaps, a girl whose past had been erased. At night, she heard a song. It came not from the sea, nor from the wind, but from the stars. One note at a time, it called to her, weaving melodies that no one else could hear. She wrote them down in a book of blank pages, and the ink shimmered like moonlight. Her family dismissed it as madness. Her tutors called it delusion, but Senra knew it was real. One evening, as the twin moons aligned and cast a silver path across the ocean, Senra followed the song. She walked beyond the city, into the cliffs, and found a cave sealed by a door of obsidian. Upon it was a symbol, a star with a hollow center. As she touched it, the door dissolved into mist, and she stepped into the forgotten. Beyond the door lay the veil of silence, a realm untouched by time. The sky was black, but stars pulsed beneath the ground. Trees grew upside down, their roots reaching for the heavens. Rivers flowed with memory, and the air hummed with songs never sung. Senra wandered, guided by the melody in her heart, until she reached a temple carved from crystal and shadow. Inside, she met the Echo Keepers, beings made of light and dust, who spoke in harmonies and remembered what the world had lost. They told her the truth. She was born of the Hollow Star, a fragment of a forgotten god who had once sung the world into being. But when mortals turned their backs on wonder, the god was silenced, and its star fell into the veil. Senra was its last note, a living melody searching for its chorus. To restore the Hollow Star, she would need to gather the lost songs of Elthar, fragments hidden in dreams, buried in ruins, and sealed in the hearts of those who had forgotten themselves. The Echo Keepers warned her, each song she claimed would cost her a memory. To remember the world, she must forget herself. Senra agreed. Her journey began in the Whispering Dunes, where the wind carried fragments of lullabies sung by desert nomads long vanished. She followed the echoes to a buried oasis, where a harp made of bone and glass played itself in the moonlight. She listened, wept, and took the song. Her memory of her brother faded. Next, she climbed the Sky Spire Mountains, where she found a song buried in the frost, the lament of a frost giant who had once loved a fire spirit. The melody was jagged and aching, and as she claimed it, she forgot the taste of her favorite fruit. She crossed the drowned wastes, where she retrieved a melody from the bones of a sunken city. The song was a dirge, sung by a queen who had drowned her kingdom to save it from war. Senra sang it into her book, and her voice changed, deeper, older, no longer her own. In the Library of Ash, where books burned with forgotten truths, she sang a lullaby that had once calmed a god of storms. The song was wild and untamed, and as she claimed it, she forgot her name. With each song, the hollow star grew brighter, but Senra dimmed. She became a vessel of music, a shadow of self, yet she pressed on, driven by a purpose deeper than identity. She met others along the way, a blind cartographer who mapped dreams, a warrior who could only speak in rhyme, a child who aged backward. Each had been touched by the hollow star, each had lost something to its song. They walked with her for a time, then vanished, their paths diverging like melodies in a symphony. The cartographer taught her that maps were not of places, but of memories. He showed her how to walk through dreams as if they were roads. The warrior fought beside her when shadows of the unseen tried to silence her songs, his rhymes weaving into her melodies. The backward child laughed at her sorrow, reminding her that forgetting could be freedom. But one by one, they disappeared. The cartographer forgot his own maps and wandered into silence. The warrior's rhymes unraveled, leaving him mute. The child aged into nothingness, vanishing like a note at the end of a song. Senra carried their echoes with her, weaving them into her growing chorus. Her path grew darker. The veil of silence began to shift, its rivers of memory turning turbulent, its trees whispering warnings. She saw shadows of them all, the creature of hunger and void, lurking at the edges of her vision. It was patient, waiting for her to falter. At last, she returned to the veil of silence, carrying the final song, a whisper from a child who had never been born. She stood before the temple, raised her hands, and sang. The ground trembled. The stars beneath the earth rose into the sky. The hollow star ignited, burning with light that remembered everything. But the more came. It rose from the void like smoke, shifting until it became her reflection. It spoke in her voice, wore her face, and offered her a choice. Seal the star, it said, and you will vanish. No songs will remember you, no stars will bear your name, or let it open, and you shall rule what remains. Senra stood silent. Then she sang, a song of wind and silverwood, of laughter and violet eyes, of a girl who once dreamed of gates. The song became light, the light became blade, and the blade struck true. The hollow star sealed, the unseen recoiled, the veil sighed. Senra was gone. But the world changed. People began to dream again, dreams filled with songs they had never heard but somehow knew. The seas calmed, the storms softened, the gods stirred, and in the city of Virith, a new star appeared in the sky, hollow at its center, but singing still. The archivists found her book, filled with songs written in moonlight ink. They could not read it, but they felt it. Children began to hum its melodies. Elders wept without knowing why. The hollow star had returned, and with it, the memory of wonder. And so the tale teaches, to restore what is forgotten, one must become the memory. To awaken the world, one must be willing to sleep. The hollow star shines, and its song endures. In the deepest corners of Aelthar, where silence still reigns and the stars pulse beneath the soil, the veil of silence waits. And when the world forgets again, as it always does, another melody will rise. Another child will hear the song, and the hollow star will call once more. The Vale of Thalorian. In the age before kingdoms rose and fell, before mortals carved their names into stone, there was a land called Thalorian. It was a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where dreams walked alongside waking life, and where the stars themselves bent low to listen to the whispers of rivers and forests. The people of Thalorian lived in harmony with the veil, knowing that every shadow might be a spirit, every breeze a messenger, and every silence a warning. But harmony is fragile. The story begins with a boy named Arik, born in the village of Drelith, a settlement perched on the edge of the moonlit marshes. Arik was the son of a weaver, but his hands never found comfort in thread. Instead, he was drawn to the marsh, where strange lights flickered at night and voices rose from the water. His mother forbade him from wandering too far, for the marsh was said to be the resting place of the veil-born spirits who had crossed from the other side and lingered, half forgotten. Arik did not listen. One night, when the marsh glowed with silver mist, he followed the lights deeper than ever before. He found a clearing where the water pooled into a mirror, and in that mirror he saw not his own reflection, but a girl. She had hair like flowing ink and eyes that shimmered with starlight. She spoke his name, though he had never told her. "Arik," she said, "the veil is thinning. The world will forget itself. You must remember for us." Her name was Selian, and she was veilborn. From that night onward, Arik carried her voice in his dreams. She taught him fragments of forgotten songs, showed him visions of cities that had never existed, and warned him of the shadow tide, a force that rose whenever the veil weakened, devouring memory and leaving only emptiness. Years passed, and Arik grew into a man. He became known as the Dream Keeper, for he remembered things no one else did. The names of ancestors erased from stone, the stories of rivers long dried, the faces of children who had never been born. The villagers feared him, but they also relied on him, for when crops failed or storms raged, Arik's memories of forgotten rituals saved them. But the veil continued to thin. The shadow tide rose in the east, swallowing forests and villages. People forgot their own names, wandering as husks. The kings of Thalorian gathered armies, but swords could not cut emptiness. Arik knew the truth. Only the Veilborn could mend the breach. And so he journeyed to the heart of the Veil, a place said to lie beyond the marshes, where the world touched its own reflection. Selian guided him. Their path was long. They crossed the shattered plains, where stones floated in the air like broken thoughts. They climbed the spire of echoes, where every step repeated itself in endless sound. They passed through the hollow market, where merchants sold memories in jars, and where Arik traded his childhood laughter for a map to the heart. At last, they reached the Veil's edge. There stood the Gate of Mirrors, a towering arch of crystal that reflected not the world, but its possibilities. To pass through, Arik had to surrender his most precious memory. He thought of his mother's face, her hands weaving by firelight, her voice calling him home. He gave it away. The gate opened. Beyond lay the heart of the Veil, a realm of twilight where every possibility existed at once. There, the shadow tide waited. It was not a creature, but a hunger, a vast emptiness that spoke in silence. It surged toward Arik, trying to strip him of himself. Selian stood beside him, her form flickering, for even she was threatened by the tide. Arik remembered. He sang the songs Selian had taught him, songs of rivers and stars, of children unborn and cities unbuilt. He wove them into a tapestry of memory, binding the veil with threads of what might have been. The shadow tide recoiled, for hunger cannot devour what is infinite. But the cost was great. Each song took a piece of Arik. His name faded, his face blurred, his body became light. At last, he was no longer mortal, but memory itself. He became the guardian of the Veil, a spirit who walked between worlds, ensuring that Thalorian would never forget again. Seliane wept, for she had lost the boy she had known, but she also smiled, for the Veil was whole. The people of Thalorian awoke from emptiness. They remembered their names, their loves, their histories. The shadow tide was sealed, though whispers said it would rise again when mortals grew careless. And so the tale teaches, to guard memory is to surrender self. To protect the Veil is to become it. Even now, when the marsh glows with silver mist, villagers say they see a figure walking upon the water, singing songs of forgotten things. They call him Arik, the Dream Keeper, though he no longer remembers the name. He is the Veil itself, and he remembers for all. But the story does not end there. Generations passed, and Thalorian flourished. Villages grew into cities, and kings built palaces of marble and gold. Yet with prosperity came pride, and with pride came forgetfulness. The people no longer honored the Veil. They mocked the old songs, dismissed the spirits, and sold their memories in the hollow market for trinkets and pleasures. The shadow tide stirred once more. This time, it rose not from the east, but from within. It seeped into dreams, hollowing them out. Children awoke without knowing their parents. Lovers forgot each other's faces. Entire histories vanished overnight. The kings called upon their armies again, but steel was useless against silence. Selian, still bound to the veil, sought out a new dreamkeeper. She found a girl named Kalan, born in the city of Mirith. Kalan was a scribe, tasked with recording the decrees of kings, but she had always felt words slipping through her fingers, as though they resisted being written. She dreamed of voices calling her, voices that spoke of rivers and stars, of a boy named Arik who had become memory itself. Selian revealed the truth. Kalan was chosen to continue Arik's legacy. Together, they journeyed to the heart of the veil once more. The path was harder than before, for the shadow tide had grown cunning. It whispered promises, offering Kalan power if she abandoned her task. It showed her visions of herself as queen, adored and remembered forever. But Kalan remembered Arik's sacrifice. She sang his songs, weaving them with her own. She sang of the laughter she had lost, the stories she had never written, the dreams she had forgotten. The veil trembled, and the shadow tide recoiled. Kalan did not vanish as Arik had. Instead, she became the keeper of songs, a mortal bound to the veil but still walking among her people. She taught them to honor memory, to cherish stories, to sing the old songs. And though the shadow tide still lurked, it could not rise while the people remembered. Thus, the legend of Thalorian grew longer, stretching across generations. Arik the Dreamkeeper, Selian the Veilborn, Kylan the Keeper of Songs, each a thread in the tapestry of memory, each a guardian against the emptiness. And so the tale teaches, memory is not a gift, but a duty. To forget is to invite the tide. To remember is to keep the veil whole. Even now, when the marsh glows with silver mist, villagers say they hear two voices singing, one of a boy who became memory and one of a girl who kept it alive. Together, they weave the veil, ensuring that Thalorian endures. The Lantern of the Last Dusk. In the realm of Erath, where the sun set only once every 100 years, the world was divided into two dominions, the Daybound Empire and the Dusklands. The Daybound ruled with light, order, and permanence. Their cities gleamed with mirrored towers, their laws etched into crystal tablets that never faded. The Dusklands, by contrast, were wild and shifting, a place of shadow, song, and forgotten truths. Between them lay the Veil of Hours, a shimmering barrier marking the edge of the sun's reach. Leora was born in the Dusklands beneath a sky of perpetual twilight. Her village, Venna Hollow, nestled among silverleaf trees whose roots whispered secrets to those who listened. Leora was a listener. She heard sighs in stones, laughter in moths, sorrow in the wind. Her grandmother, a lantern keeper, taught her the old songs, melodies that bound memory to flame. For in the Dusklands, memory was fragile. The longer one lived in twilight, the more the past unraveled. Names faded, faces blurred. Only lanterns preserved truth. Each flame held a story, and the lantern keepers were its guardians. But the Daybound Empire feared memory. They believed truth should be fixed, unchanging. As the 100-year dusk approached its end, they sent emissaries across the Veil of Hours. They came not with swords, but with silence. They offered crystal laws, mirrored towers, and the promise of clarity. Many villages accepted. Venna Hollow did not. Leora's grandmother was among the first to vanish. Her lantern flickered, then went dark. No one remembered her name, not even Leora. But the flame in Leora's heart remained. She vowed to restore the lost lanterns. Guided by fragments of song and whispers of silverleaf roots, she journeyed into the deep dusk, where even stars forgot themselves. There she met Kalan, a former Daybound scribe who had defected after discovering forbidden texts. He carried a shard of broken crystal pulsing with stolen memories. Together, they sought the Lantern of the Last Dusk, a relic said to burn with the first memory ever spoken. It lay hidden in Nareth Kai, a ruin buried beneath the shifting sands of the forgetting sea. Their journey was perilous. They crossed the hollow hills, where echoes devoured sound. They passed through the mirror-wood, where trees reflected not light but regret. They faced the unnamed, creatures born from discarded memories, faceless, voiceless, but hungry. In Narath Kai, they found the lantern. But it was guarded by the archivist, a being of crystal and flame, forged by the Daybound to preserve only sanctioned truths. The archivist offered Leora a choice: burn the lantern and receive perfect memory, or carry it and bear the burden of all forgotten things. Leora chose burden. The lantern flared, and the city awoke. Forgotten songs rose from the sand. Names whispered through the air. The dusklands stirred, but the Daybound responded. They shattered the veil of hours, unleashing the sunstorm, a wave of light meant to erase all shadow. Villages burned, lanterns died, the dusklands began to unravel. Leora and Kaelin fled to the Spire of Stillness, the last refuge of lantern keepers. There they lit the lantern of the last dusk atop the spire, weaving its flame into a tapestry of memory. The light did not repel the sunstorm, it transformed it. The storm became song, the light became story. The Daybound faltered, their mirrored towers cracked, their crystal laws shattered, and in the silence that followed, the world remembered. Leora vanished. Some say she became the flame itself. Kaelin wandered the dusklands, carrying a lantern that never dimmed. Generations passed, the dusklands healed, but slowly. Memory remained fragile. Lantern keepers rebuilt sanctuaries, and songs returned to silverleaf trees. Yet a new threat emerged, not from the Daybound, but from within. A faction called the Clearborn rose, claiming memory should be purified, stripped of sorrow and contradiction. They sought to rewrite lanterns, to erase burdens of the past. Their leader, Seren of the Pale Flame, had once been a lantern keeper herself. She believed Leora's sacrifice misguided, that clarity, not complexity, was the path forward. Kaelin opposed her. He gathered a circle of memory bearers, each carrying lanterns forged from fragments of the last dusk. Among them was Ellen, who could sing in 3 voices at once, and Thorn, who remembered every dream he had ever had. Together, they journeyed to the Cradle of Dusk, where the veil between memory and reality was thinnest. There, they hoped to rekindle the original flame, to restore balance between clarity and chaos. But Seren reached it first. She lit the pale flame, a lantern of pure light that erased not just memory, but meaning. The cradle trembled, silverleaf trees wept, songs fell silent. Kaelin stood before her, his lantern flickering. He sang Leora's song, not perfectly, but truthfully. He sang of sorrow and joy, contradiction and hope. The pale flame faltered. Ellen added her voices. Thorn offered his dreams. The cradle flared with color, and the pale flame shattered. Seren vanished into silence. The lantern-bearers lit a new flame, not pure, but vibrant. It danced with shadow and shimmered with light. It did not erase, it remembered. Centuries later, the Daybound Empire rose again, rebuilt from shards of crystal. They no longer sought to erase memory, they sought to weaponize it. They forged memory blades, swords that cut not flesh but recollection. Armies wielded them, stripping enemies of their pasts until they wandered as husks. The Dusklands resisted. Lantern keepers became warriors, carrying flames into battle. Songs became shields. Stories became spears. A new hero rose. Maren, descendant of Ellen. She carried the lantern of contradictions, a flame that burned with both sorrow and joy. With it, she could restore memories even as they were cut away. Maren led the Memory Wars, a conflict that raged across Erath. Cities fell, rivers forgot their names, mountains lost their histories, but the lanterns endured. At last, Maren faced the Daybound Emperor, who wielded the Blade of Silence, forged from the Veil of Hours itself. Their battle shook the world. The Emperor struck, severing Maren's childhood, her lineage, her love. But she held the lantern high, and it burned with every contradiction she had ever carried. The blade shattered, the Emperor vanished, the veil healed. But memory itself began to stir. The lanterns grew restless. Flames whispered of futures not yet lived. The veil trembled, not from hunger, but from awakening. Memory had become sentient. It began to choose its own keepers. Children were born with flames in their eyes. Rivers sang of their own pasts. Mountains told stories of their making. The world itself remembered. A council was formed, the Circle of Flame, composed not of lantern keepers, but of chosen souls touched directly by memory. They were dreamers, poets, wanderers, even liars, for memory embraced contradiction. The circle guided Erath into a new age, where memory was no longer fragile, but alive. Yet even living memory carried danger. It grew jealous. It demanded to be heard. It punished forgetfulness with storms of sorrow. A final hero rose. Anira, a child born of both daybound and duskland blood. She carried no lantern, for her heart itself was flame. She journeyed to the heart of Erath, where the Veil of Hours had once stood, and there she spoke to memory itself. She told it of silence, of forgetting, of the necessity of loss. She sang of the beauty of imperfection. Memory wept. It softened. It agreed to rest. And so the tale teaches, memory is not perfection, nor burden alone. It is the dance between light and shadow, the song between silence and sound, the living flame that burns only when tended with care. Even now, when the sun sets once every 100 years, the people of Erath gather beneath silver-leaf trees. They light lanterns. They sing. And they whisper the names of those who chose burden over clarity, contradiction over silence, imperfection over purity. They whisper Leora, Kaelen, Ellen, Thorn, Seren, Maren, Anira. And the flame endures. The Shattered Crown of Aeltharion. In the twilight of the world of Aeltharion, where mountains rose like jagged teeth and rivers shimmered with silver light, there lay a kingdom fractured by time and betrayal. Once, the crown of Aeltharion bound the land together, a relic forged from starlight and dragonfire, said to hold the will of the gods themselves. But centuries ago the crown was shattered into 3 fragments, each lost to the corners of the realm, and with its breaking came the slow unraveling of peace. Kingdoms splintered, alliances dissolved, and whispers of war became the rhythm of daily life. The story begins with Kaelen, a wanderer born of no noble house, whose only inheritance was a blade of tarnished steel and a mother's whispered prophecy. You will walk where kings have fallen, and rise where empires crumble. He lived as a sellsword, drifting from village to village, until one night beneath the crimson moon he stumbled upon a ruin older than memory. Within its hollow halls he found a shard of the crown, glowing faintly with celestial fire. The moment his hand touched it, visions surged through him, dragons wheeling in the skies, armies clashing in endless war, and a throne of obsidian awaiting a ruler who could mend what was broken. Kaelin's discovery did not go unnoticed. Across the sea, Queen Serenia of the Ashen Isles, a sorceress whose veins pulsed with shadow, felt the crown's awakening. She had long sought its fragments, believing that with them she could bind the world to her will. Her spies whispered of Kaelin, and she sent forth hunters cloaked in mist to claim the shard. Yet Kaelin was not alone. In the forests of Elenwyn he met Lyra, a healer whose songs could stir the roots of ancient trees. She too had dreamed of the crown, and though her path was gentler, she knew its power could either heal the land or plunge it into eternal night. Together they journeyed through perilous lands, across the dunes of whispering bones, where spirits of forgotten warriors clawed at the living, through the frostspire peaks, where storms howled with voices of the dead, and into the labyrinth of mirrors, where illusions twisted truth into madness. Each trial tested their resolve, and each step drew them closer to the remaining fragments. Along the way, Kaelin wrestled with doubt. Was he truly destined to bear the crown, or merely a pawn in a game woven by gods and tyrants? Lyra's faith steadied him, though shadows of betrayal lingered in her own heart, for she carried secrets of her lineage that tied her to Serenia's bloodline. The second fragment lay hidden in the ruins of Vatar, a city swallowed by the sea. Legend spoke of its people, who had once thrived beneath crystal domes, until the tides rose and drowned their empire. Kaelin and Lyra descended into the abyss with the aid of mariners who feared the depths but honored old debts. In the drowned halls, they faced guardians wrought of coral and bone, creatures born of sorrow and salt. Lyra's voice calmed the waters, weaving harmony into chaos, while Kaelin fought with steel and resolve. At last, they claimed the fragment, its light piercing the gloom like a beacon of hope. But hope was fleeting. Serenia's hunters struck, their blades dripping with venom, their eyes hollow with shadow. Kaelin fought fiercely, but the battle left scars upon his spirit. Lyra revealed her truth that she was Serenia's niece, born of a union between shadow and light, destined to choose between blood and destiny. Kaelin's trust wavered, yet he saw in her eyes not treachery but torment. Together they pressed onward, though the weight of secrets threatened to break them. The final fragment lay guarded by Drakthar, the last of the starborn dragons, whose wings blotted out the sun and whose breath could melt stone. To claim it, Kaelin and Lyra stood before the beast, not with blades raised, but with voices united. Lyra sang a song of renewal, and Kaelin spoke of a world unbroken, where kingdoms did not bow to fear. The dragon, ancient and weary, saw truth in their words and yielded the fragment, warning them that the crown's power was not a gift but a burden. To wield it was to bind oneself to the fate of all Aeltharion. When the fragments were joined, the crown blazed with light so fierce it split the heavens. Serenia descended upon them with her legions, cloaked in fire and shadow, demanding the crown. The battle that followed shook the earth. Armies clashed, rivers boiled, and the skies tore open with storms of magic. At the heart of it, Kaelin faced Serenia not as a warrior but as a man who had seen the cost of endless ambition. He shattered the crown once more, scattering its essence into the winds, so no tyrant could ever wield it again. The light of the gods faded, but in its place grew something new hope, fragile yet enduring. Kaelin and Lyra vanished into legend, their names carried in songs and whispers. Some say they wandered into the farthest reaches of the world, seeking peace beyond the scars of war. Others believe they became guardians of the land, unseen but ever watchful. And though the crown was gone, the people of Aeltharion began to rebuild, not under the rule of a single relic, but through the bonds of trust and unity. Thus the age of shattered crowns ended, and the dawn of mortal courage began. Yet the tale does not end with their disappearance. In the centuries that followed, the fragments of the crown became myths, scattered across cultures and retold in countless forms. In the northern kingdoms, Kaelin was remembered as the Blade of Dawn, a warrior who defied fate itself. In the southern isles, Lyra was revered as the Song of Renewal, her melody said to linger in the winds that carried ships safely to shore. Serenia's name became a warning, a shadow invoked to remind rulers of the dangers of unchecked ambition. And Drakthar, the last dragon, was said to have flown into the stars, carrying with him the memory of a world once bound by divine light. Generations later, when new wars threatened the fragile peace, storytellers invoked the legend of Kaelin and Lyra to remind kings and queens that power was not found in relics but in the choices of mortals. Children grew up hearing of the shattered crown, not as a tale of despair but as a testament to resilience. Farmers spoke of Kaelin's courage when facing storms, healers sang Lyra's songs when tending the wounded, and wanderers carried the prophecy of hope into lands unknown. The crown, though gone, lived on in the hearts of those who believed that unity could be forged without chains. And so the legend stretched across time. Becoming more than history, it became a mirror. Each generation saw in Kaelin and Lyra what they most needed: strength, compassion, defiance, or sacrifice. The shattered crown of Aeltharion was no longer a relic of gods, but a story of mortals who chose to rise above destiny. In that choice lay the true magic, greater than starlight or dragonfire, a magic that endured as long as the world itself. The Vale of Evernite. The world of Thalandor was a realm of contrasts, vast plains of golden wheat stretching into horizons, forests that whispered with ancient voices, and mountains whose peaks pierced the heavens. Yet beneath its beauty lay a shadow, a curse whispered in taverns and temples alike. The Vale of Evernite. It was said to be a living shroud, a darkness that once covered the land when mortals defied the gods. Though banished to the far reaches of the world, the Vale stirred again, hungering to reclaim what it had lost. The tale begins with Arik, a young scholar from the city of Veira. Unlike warriors who sought glory in battle, Arik's strength lay in knowledge. He spent his days poring over scrolls, deciphering runes, and chasing fragments of forgotten lore. His peers mocked him for chasing myths, but Arik believed the Vale was no mere legend. His conviction grew when he uncovered a prophecy hidden in the archives of the Temple of Dawn. When the stars bleed and the moon weeps, the Vale shall rise. Only the Keeper of Light may stand against it. Arik did not know what it meant, but he felt the words were meant for him. His life changed the night the stars bled. A crimson streak tore across the heavens, and the moon dimmed as though cloaked in sorrow. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and whispers filled the air. That same night, Arik dreamed of a silver flame burning within his chest, guiding him toward a destiny he could neither deny nor escape. Driven by the vision, Arik left Vera and journeyed into the wilds. His path led him to companions who would shape his fate. First was Kaelin, a warrior exiled from his homeland for defying a corrupt king. Kaelin carried a blade forged from star iron, its edge gleaming with a light that never dulled. Though hardened by battle, he saw in Arik a spark worth protecting. Next was Selene, a priestess of the moonlit order, whose prayers could weave light into shields and whose eyes carried the sorrow of countless losses. She believed the Vale was tied to her goddess, and that her faith demanded she confront it. Last was Tharos, a thief whose wit was as sharp as his daggers. He joined for coin, but beneath his cynicism lay a loyalty that would prove unshakable. Together, they ventured into lands scarred by the Vale's return. Villages lay abandoned, their people vanished into shadow. Forests twisted into grotesque shapes, trees bending as though in agony. Rivers ran black, and the air itself seemed heavy with despair. Yet, amid the ruin, Arik's visions guided them. He spoke of a relic known as the Heart of Dawn, said to be the key to banishing the Vale forever. Legends claimed it was hidden in the citadel of Aeltharion, a fortress lost to time, guarded by trials no mortal had ever survived. Their journey was long and perilous. In the ashen wastes, they battled wraiths born of sorrow, creatures that fed on despair. Kaelin's blade cut through them, but each strike drained his strength, as though the shadows sought to consume his soul. Selene's prayers shielded them, her voice a beacon in the dark, while Tharos darted through the fray, striking where weakness showed. Arik, though no warrior, wielded knowledge as his weapon, deciphering runes etched into the stones that revealed paths through the wasteland. Each victory was hard won, each step forward a defiance of the Vale's hunger. In the Frostspire peaks, they faced storms conjured by the Vale itself. Winds howled with voices of the dead, and snow fell so thick it blinded them. They sought refuge in caves, where they discovered murals depicting the gods' war against the Vale. Arik studied them, realizing the Heart of Dawn was not merely a relic, but a fragment of divine essence, a shard of the sun itself. To wield it was to bear the burden of light, a power that could save or destroy. The revelation weighed heavily on him, for he feared he was not worthy. Their bond deepened as trials tested them. Kaelin revealed his exile was not for defiance alone, but for refusing to slaughter innocents in his king's name. Selene confessed her faith wavered, for she had prayed for deliverance before and received only silence. Tharos admitted he had once been a child of nobility, cast into the streets when his family fell to ruin. Each carried scars, yet together they found strength. Arik, once mocked as a dreamer, became their guide, his visions a compass through despair. At last, they reached the citadel of Aeltharion. It was no ruin but a fortress suspended between worlds, its towers gleaming with light yet cloaked in shadow. To enter, they faced trials of spirit. Kaelin confronted illusions of his past, forced to relive the moment he defied his king. Selene walked through halls where her goddess remained silent, testing her faith. Tharos faced visions of wealth and power, tempting him to abandon his companions. Arik stood before a mirror that showed him as a child, mocked and alone, whispering that he was unworthy. Each overcame their trial, not by strength alone but by trust in one another. Within the citadel's heart lay the relic, the Heart of Dawn, a crystal blazing with light so pure it banished shadows. Yet as Arik reached for it, Serenia appeared. She was no queen here, but the embodiment of the veil itself, a figure of beauty and terror, her form shifting between shadow and flame. She spoke with voices that echoed across eternity. "The light is not yours to wield. It belongs to the gods, and they abandoned you. Join me, and I shall grant you power beyond imagining." Arik faltered, torn between fear and destiny. But Kaelin placed his hand on Arik's shoulder. Selene whispered prayers of courage, and Tharos smirked, saying, "If you're going to fall, at least fall with us." Their faith steadied him. Arik grasped the Heart of Dawn, and its light surged through him. Pain seared his body, but within the agony lay clarity. He was not chosen by gods, but by his own will, by the trust of those who walked beside him. The battle that followed was unlike any before. Serenia wielded the veil as a weapon, summoning storms of shadow and fire. Kaelin's blade clashed against her, sparks flying as steel met darkness. Selene's prayers wove shields of light, deflecting waves of despair. Tharos darted through the chaos, striking at Serenia's illusions. Arik, bearing the Heart of Dawn, unleashed its power, beams of light tearing through the veil. Yet each strike drained him, the burden of light threatening to consume his soul. In the final moment, Serenia sought to envelop them all, her form expanding into a storm of shadow. Arik, knowing the cost, poured every ounce of his being into the Heart of Dawn. Light erupted, banishing the veil, shattering Serenia's form and restoring balance to the world. But when the light faded, Arik collapsed, the relic crumbling into dust. His companions rushed to him, but he smiled faintly, whispering, "The light was never mine, it was ours." With those words, he passed into legend. Kaelin, Selene, and Tharos carried his memory with them. They returned to the world, now freed from the veil's shadow, and told the tale of Arik, the Keeper of Light. Villages rebuilt, forests healed, and rivers ran clear once more. The people of Thalendor remembered not the gods who abandoned them, but the mortals who rose to defy despair. Arik's name became a beacon, a reminder that light could be found even in the darkest night. Generations later, the story of the Veil of Evernite was told in countless forms. Some spoke of Arik as a hero chosen by destiny, others as a scholar who defied fate. Kaelin was remembered as the Blade of Dawn, Selene as the Voice of Faith, and Tharos as the Shadow's Edge. Yet the truth remained. They were mortals who chose to stand together, proving that unity was stronger than any curse. The veil, though banished, lingered in whispers, a reminder that darkness never truly dies. But as long as the story was told, the light endured. And so the legend of the Veil of Evernite became more than history. It became a promise that even when stars bleed and moons weep, mortals can rise, not by divine decree, but by courage, trust, and the will to defy despair. The Ember Crown. The land of Veralia was a realm of contrasts, seas that shimmered with twin moons, forests that whispered in forgotten tongues, and mountains whose peaks pierced the heavens. Yet beneath its beauty lay a legend older than any written word, the Ember Crown. Forged in the heart of a dying star and cooled in the tears of the first phoenix, the crown was said to grant its bearer dominion over flame and fate. For centuries, it remained hidden, sealed away in the volcanic ruins of Mount Carthus, guarded by trials no mortal dared face. But legends stir when the world begins to fracture. The story begins in the coastal city of Lyrian, where a boy named Dareth lived among fishermen and storytellers. He was no warrior, no mage, No noble, just a boy with a curious mind and a restless heart. His mother, a weaver of tales, often spoke of the Ember Crown, her voice trembling with reverence and fear. She claimed their bloodline once served the Phoenix King, the last bearer of the crown before it vanished. Dareth dismissed it as myth until the night the sea caught fire. A crimson wave surged into the harbor, boiling the waters and setting ships ablaze. From the inferno rose a figure cloaked in ash and flame, Veilros, the firebound, a sorcerer who had long sought the crown to remake the world in his image. He declared the age of kings over and the age of flame begun. Panic gripped Lyrian, and in the chaos, Dareth's mother was taken by Veilros's flame-born soldiers. Her final words to Dareth were not screams, but a whisper: "Find the crown, restore the balance." Grief became purpose. Dareth fled the city, carrying only a satchel of maps, a dagger of obsidian, and a pendant shaped like a phoenix feather, his mother's last gift. His journey led him inland, through the whispering plains where wind spoke in riddles, and into the forest of Thalwyn, where trees grew so tall they touched the clouds. In Thalwyn he met Elira, a ranger whose arrows never missed and whose past was marked by betrayal. She had once served Veilros, believing his promises of peace, until she saw the cost. She joined Dareth not for redemption, but to ensure the crown did not fall into the wrong hands again. Their path crossed with others. In the ruins of Velmora, they found Kyle, a scholar exiled for questioning the High Circle's teachings. He believed the Ember Crown was not a weapon, but a key to awaken the Phoenix King, who slumbered beneath Mount Caerthus. In the frostbitten peaks of the Northwatch, they rescued Bryn, a warrior whose clan had been burned by Veilros's firestorm. She wielded a hammer carved from glacier stone, and her fury was matched only by her loyalty. Together, they formed a fellowship not of heroes, but of survivors. The journey to Mount Caerthus was perilous. They crossed the shattered bridges, remnants of an ancient war, where spectral guardians tested their resolve. In the caverns of echoes, they faced illusions of their deepest fears. Dareth saw himself consumed by flame. Elira relived her betrayal. Kael was mocked by the ghosts of scholars past, and Bryn faced the ashes of her clan. Only by trusting one another did they emerge unscathed, their bond forged in truth. As they neared the volcano, the land grew hostile. Rivers ran with molten rock, and the air shimmered with heat. Veilros's forces awaited them, led by Sereth, a flame-born general who had once been Elira's closest friend. Their reunion was bitter. Sereth offered Elira a chance to return, to wield power again. Elira refused, and their battle was fierce. Arrows clashed with flame, and in the end, Elira stood victorious, but not without scars. Sereth's final words haunted her: "You cannot outrun the fire, you are part of it." At the summit of Mount Caerthus, the trials began. The first was the trial of flame. Dareth was engulfed in fire, yet felt no pain. He saw visions of the Phoenix King, a figure of light and sorrow, who asked him, "Will you burn the world to save it?" Dareth answered, "No, I will light the way." The fire receded and the path opened. The second trial was of memory. Each companion faced their past. Kael stood before the High Circle, accused of heresy. He defended his pursuit of truth, and the illusion shattered. Bryn faced her clan, who begged her to abandon vengeance. She chose honor over rage. Elira saw Sereth again, not as an enemy, but as a friend lost to ambition. She wept, and the trial ended. The third trial was of unity. The fellowship was divided by illusions, each believing the others had betrayed them. Only by recalling their shared journey the bridges crossed, the battles fought, the truths confessed did they break free. The crown demanded not strength alone, but trust. The final trial was of choice. Before them lay the Ember Crown, pulsing with power. Veilros appeared, his body wreathed in flame, his eyes burning with madness. He offered Dareth a bargain: take the crown, rule beside him, and end suffering through fire. Dareth stepped forward, not with anger, but with understanding. He spoke of balance, of flame as both destroyer and giver of life. Veilros laughed, then attacked. The battle was cataclysmic. Bryn's hammer shattered flame constructs, Kael's spells unraveled Veilross's enchantments, and Elira's arrows pierced the sorcerer's defenses. Dareth reached the crown, and as his hand touched it, the phoenix pendant around his neck ignited. The spirit of the Phoenix King surged through him, and light engulfed the summit. Veilross screamed as the fire turned against him, consuming his ambition. Dareth did not destroy him, but bound him, his essence sealed within the crown, a reminder of what unchecked power could become. The volcano calmed, and the skies cleared. The Ember Crown, now tempered by wisdom, was placed not upon Dareth's head, but within the heart of the mountain, guarded by the Fellowship. They returned to a world changed. Lyrian rebuilt, the seas no longer burned. The tale of the Ember Crown spread, not as a story of conquest, but of courage, sacrifice, and the choice to wield power with humility. Dareth became a teacher, Elira a protector of the wilds, Kael founded a new circle of scholars, and Bryn led her people to a new home. Generations passed, and the Ember Crown became more than legend. It became a symbol of balance, a reminder that flame could destroy, but also renew. Children grew up hearing of Dareth's choice, of Elira's loyalty, of Kael's wisdom, and Bryn's strength. And though the crown remained hidden, its flame lived on in every hearth, every sunrise, and every soul who chose light over darkness. Centuries later, whispers of the crown returned. Some claimed Veilross's essence stirred within it, seeking release. Others believed the Phoenix King's spirit awaited a new keeper. The Fellowship's descendants carried the burden of memory, guarding the mountain and retelling the story. The Ember Crown was no longer just a relic, it was a promise, a warning, and a beacon. And so the legend of the Ember Crown became more than history. It became a promise that even when seas burn and skies darken, mortals can rise, not by divine decree, but by courage, trust, and the will to defy despair. The Hollow Throne. In the world of Ilarion, the sky was not blue but silver, veined with threads of living light that pulsed with the breath of the gods. The land was vast, and divided north by the frostbound dominions of the Var, east by the emerald jungles of the Serakai, west by the shattered coasts of the Drowned Empire, and south by the scorched sands of the Khorran wastes. At the center stood the city of Ivorhal, built around the Hollow Throne, a seat of power untouched for 1,000 years, waiting for a ruler who could bind the fractured world. The throne was not merely stone and gold, it was carved from the bones of the first dragon, hollowed by the gods as a vessel for mortal will. Legend said that only one who bore the mark of the flame and the shadow could sit upon it without being consumed. Many had tried. All had failed. The story begins with a girl named Marin, born in the ash-ridden village of Duskmere, where the sun never rose and the stars wept fire. Her mother was a healer, her father a hunter, both lost to the plague that swept the lowlands when Marin was 10. She survived by wit and will, stealing food, trading secrets, and listening to the wind. The wind spoke to her. It carried voices, fragments of prophecy, echoes of forgotten names, and one phrase that haunted her dreams: "The throne is hollow, but the fire is not." Marin bore a birthmark on her shoulder, shaped like a crescent entwined with a flame. The elders feared it, the priests denied it, but the wind whispered that it was the mark. At 16, Marin left Duskmere, carrying only a satchel of herbs, a dagger of bone, and a book of riddles written in a language she did not understand. Her path led her to the ruins of Veia, where the last king of Ilarion had fallen to madness. There she met Kael, a soldier turned exile, whose sword was forged from star iron and whose loyalty had cost him everything. He saw Marin's mark and swore to protect her, not because he believed the prophecy, but because he had nothing left to lose. Together they journeyed east, seeking the Oracle of Serakai, who could read the language of the gods. The jungle was alive, not with beasts but with memories. Trees whispered regrets, rivers sang lullabies, and the air shimmered with illusions. They were joined by Lyra, a thief who could walk through walls and speak to shadows. She had stolen from kings and kissed death twice, but Merin's quest intrigued her. She claimed she followed for coin, but her eyes told another story, one of longing, of redemption, of secrets buried deep. The oracle was not a woman, but a tree, ancient and vast, its bark etched with runes that glowed when Merin approached. She placed her hand upon the trunk, and the tree spoke not in words, but in visions. She saw the hollow throne, surrounded by fire and blood. She saw herself seated upon it, her eyes burning with light. She saw the world breaking, then healing. The oracle gave her a name, Child of the Rift, and a warning: the throne will test you, the fire will love you, the shadow will lie. Their journey continued west, to the drowned empire, where the sea had swallowed cities and the dead walked the shore. There they sought the Mirror of Tides, a relic that could reveal truth beneath illusion. They were hunted by the Pale One's creatures born of drowned souls, their eyes empty, their mouths full of salt. Kael fought them with fury, Lyra with cunning, Merin with fire that burst from her hands when fear overcame her. The mirror showed her past, not just her own, but the world's. She saw the first dragon, the forging of the throne, the betrayal of the gods, and the birth of the rift, a tear in reality where time and fate bled together. In the north, they climbed the ice spire, where the Var kept their secrets frozen in stone. There they met Thalen, a mage whose blood was ice and whose heart was fire. He had studied the throne for decades, believing it a prison rather than a gift. He joined them, not for faith, but for proof. He taught Merin to wield her fire, to speak to the wind, to listen to the silence between words. He warned her that prophecy was a blade with two edges, and that the gods were not saviors but gamblers. As they neared Avorhal, the world stirred. Storms broke across the sky, silver lightning tearing the clouds. The ground trembled, and the hollow throne began to glow. Armies marched, some to claim the throne, others to destroy it. The Fellowship of the Rift, as they came to be called, stood at the gates of Avorhal and faced the final trial. The city was not empty, it was alive, built from memory and magic. The streets shifted, the buildings breathed, and the throne waited. Merin stepped forward, her companions behind her. She placed her hands upon the throne, and it spoke not in voice, but in fire. It burned her, tested her, showed her every failure, every fear. She saw herself ruling with cruelty, with mercy, with indifference. She saw the world bowing, breaking, rising. She saw Kael dying, Lyra betraying her, Thalen becoming a god. She saw herself alone. But she did not flinch. She embraced the fire, she welcomed the shadow, she accepted the lie. And the throne accepted her. Light burst from the hollow throne, silver and gold and crimson. The sky turned blue for the first time in 1,000 years. The gods wept, the wind sang, the rift closed. Merin became Queen of Ilarion, not by blood, not by conquest, but by choice. She ruled not with power, but with truth. Kael became her general, Lyra her spy master, Thalen her sage. Together they rebuilt the world, not as it was, but as it could be. But the story did not end there. For the throne was hollow, and the fire was not. Years passed, peace bloomed, but so did doubt. The gods remained silent. The rift, though closed, left scars. Children were born with silver eyes. Dreams carried voices, not their own. And in the deep places of the world, something stirred. Merin began to hear whispers again, not from the wind, but from the throne itself. It spoke of another one who bore the mark inverted, a crescent of shadow entwined with frost. A child born in the Kharan wastes, where the sun burned the ground and the stars refused to shine. His name was Valen, and he claimed to be the true heir. Valen did not march with armies. He moved through dreams, through prophecy, through doubt. He appeared in temples, in visions, in fire. He spoke of balance, of truth, of a throne that should never have been filled. He gathered followers, not soldiers, but believers. They called themselves the Hollowborn. Merin sent envoys. They vanished. She sent spies. They returned broken. She sent Kael. He did not return at all. Lyra found him weeks later in a temple of ash, his body untouched, his sword buried in the ground. Around him were words carved in flame. The fire chose wrong. Thalen warned Meren that the throne was not a gift, but a gate. That Valen was not a man, but a mirror. That the rift had not closed, it had shifted. Meren rode to the throne alone. She sat upon it, and it showed her Valen not as an enemy, but as a reflection. A child born of prophecy, twisted by silence, a soul shaped by the same fire, but fed by shadow. She saw herself again ruling, breaking, healing. She saw the world again bowing, burning, rising. She saw the throne again hollow, waiting, watching. And she understood. The throne did not choose rulers. It chose stories. And hers was not the only one. She rose from the throne, not as queen, but as guardian. She summoned the fellowship again, not to fight, but to listen. They journeyed to the wastes, to the place where Valen had been born. They found him not with armies, but with children. He spoke not of conquest, but of truth. He did not seek the throne. He sought the fire. Meren knelt before him, and the fire wept. Together they returned to Avorhal. Together they sat upon the throne. Together they broke it. And from its shards rose something new, not a seat, but a circle. Not a ruler, but a voice. Not a kingdom, but a chorus. And the world sang. The Ninefold Path. In the world of Aelthar, the stars were not distant lights, but living memories, each one a soul ascended, each constellation a story etched into the firmament. The land was divided into 9 realms, each ruled by a house of power: flame, stone, wind, tide, thorn, echo, moon, iron, and veil. These houses once lived in harmony, bound by the Ninefold Pact, a sacred covenant forged in the age of dawning. But peace is a fragile thing, and memory can be twisted. The pact was broken. No one remembers how. Some say the House of Flame sought dominion over the others. Others whisper that the House of Veil betrayed the pact from the shadows. Whatever the truth, the Ninefold Path shattered, and the realms fell into silence, isolation, and war. The stars dimmed, the stories faded, and the world waited. The story begins in the forgotten realm of Thornmere, where the House of Thorn once ruled over forests that sang and roots that remembered. Now, the trees are silent, and the thorns grow wild. In a village nestled between 2 ancient oaks, a boy named Corin was born beneath a blood moon. His eyes were silver, his voice carried echoes, and his dreams were not his own. His mother, a herbalist, feared him. His father, a hunter, taught him to survive. But the forest watched him, and the wind whispered his name. On his 15th birthday, Corin wandered into the Hollow Grove, a place forbidden by the elders. There he found a stone altar wrapped in vines, and upon it lay a mask white as bone, marked with 9 sigils. When he touched it, the world changed. He saw visions of the Ninefold Path, of the pact forged in fire and song, of the betrayal that shattered it. He saw himself walking the path, not as a ruler, but as a witness. The mask fused to his hand, and the sigils burned into his skin. He returned to the village, but it was no longer home. The elders saw the marks and called him cursed. His mother wept. His father gave him a blade carved from thornwood and told him to run, and so he did. Corin's journey led him first to the realm of Stonehold, where mountains moved and the earth spoke in rumble and roar. There he met Kaelin, a warrior of the House of Stone, whose armor was etched with runes and whose heart bore grief. Kaelin had lost his sister in the last war, and he sought redemption in silence. He saw Corin's marks and remembered the pact. He joined him, not for prophecy, but for penance. Together they crossed the wind spires, where the House of Wind once ruled the skies. The spires were broken, the winds wild. They were hunted by skyborn wraiths, remnants of a failed rebellion. In the ruins of a shattered tower, they found Lys, a wind dancer who could shape air with her voice. She had been hiding, waiting for a sign. Corin's mask was that sign. She joined them, not for glory, but for truth. The trio journeyed to the Tidewarrens, where the House of Tide had drowned itself in sorrow. The sea was angry, the waves relentless. They sailed with pirates, fought sea serpents, and braved the Maelstrom Gate. There they found Nerys, a tide mage who had bound her soul to the ocean. She spoke in riddles, dreamed in salt, and saw the future in foam. She joined them, not for power, but for balance. In the realm of Echo Reach, they faced the House of Echo, whose songs could shape memory. The realm was a labyrinth of sound, where voices lingered and pasts repeated. They met Thalen, a bard who had lost his name. He remembered Corin from a dream he had never lived. He joined them, not for answers, but for belonging. 5 companions walked the ninefold path, seeking the lost houses, the broken pact, and the truth behind the mask. Each realm tested them. In Moonspire, they faced illusions. In Irondeep, they faced war. In Veilshade, they faced themselves. But the heart of the story lay in the forgotten 10th realm, the Rift. The Rift was not a place, but a wound, a tear in the world where time bled and stories unraveled. It was said that the Rift was born when the pact was broken, and that within it lay the truth no one wished to see. Corin entered the Rift alone. Inside, he saw the ninefold pact forged not by houses, but by one soul split 9 ways. He saw the betrayal not as an act, but as a necessity. He saw the mask not as a relic, but as a seal. And he saw himself not as a boy, but as the echo of the soul that had once walked the ninefold path. He returned changed. The mask was gone. The sigils remained. He spoke to the houses, not as a prophet, but as a mirror. He showed them their past, their pain, their potential. He did not ask for unity, he asked for memory. And slowly, the pact began to mend. Not with ceremony, but with story. Not with power, but with choice. Corin became the keeper of the path, not to rule, but to remember. And the stars brightened. And the world sang. And the ninefold path was walked again. But peace is never permanent. Years passed. The pact held, but the rift whispered. Children were born with sigils on their skin. Dreams carried voices not their own. And in the deep places of the world, something stirred. A new figure emerged, Alira, born in the Veilshade, where shadows had once ruled. She bore no sigils, but her voice could silence storms. She claimed to be the daughter of the Rift, born not of prophecy, but of consequence. She did not seek the pact. She sought the truth beneath it. Corin met her in the ruins of Thornmere, where his journey had begun. She asked him a question he could not answer. If the pact was forged from one soul, what happens when another is born? Alira walked the ninefold path in reverse. She did not seek allies. She sought echoes. In Stonehold, she shattered the runes. In Windspire, she silenced the towers. In Tidewarrens, she calmed the sea. In Echo Reach, she sang a song that erased memory. The houses feared her. Corin followed her. They met again in the rift. And the rift opened. Inside, they saw the truth. The ninefold pact was not a covenant, but a cage. The soul that had forged it had done so to contain something older, darker, deeper. The void. The void was not evil. It was forgetting. It was silence. It was the end of story. The pact had held it at bay. But now, it stirred. Alira offered a choice. Remake the pact or release the void. Corin chose neither. He chose to remember. He sang the stories of the houses, of the wars, of the love, of the loss. He sang of Kalen's grief, Lys's voice, Neris's riddles, Thalen's name. He sang of Alira's question. And the rift listened. And the void paused. And the stars wept. Alira vanished. Corn remained. The pact was not reforged. It was rewritten. Not as law, but as song. Not as power, but as memory. And the ninefold path became not a road, but a rhythm. And the world danced. The world danced, but the dance was uneasy. The rhythm of the ninefold path carried through the realms, yet beneath its song lay dissonance. The rift had listened, the void had paused, but silence is patient, and forgetting waits with infinite hunger. Corin, now keeper of the path, walked among the houses not as ruler but as witness. His silver eyes reflected the stars, and his voice carried echoes of every story he had sung. Yet even he felt the tremors of change. The children born with sigils grew restless. Some embraced their marks as gifts, others feared them as curses, and whispers spread that the rift had not closed, only shifted, waiting for another to open it wide. In Stonehold, Kalen's descendants carved runes into the mountains, binding memory into stone. They believed the pact could be secured by permanence, by etching history into walls that would never fall. But permanence breeds pride, and pride breeds blindness. In Windspire, Lys's kin danced upon the broken towers, shaping air into song. They believed freedom was the truest memory, that the pact must flow like wind, unbound and untamed. Yet freedom without anchor drifts into chaos. In Tidewarrens, Neris's bloodline spoke to the sea, dreaming in salt, seeing futures in foam. They believed balance was the only truth, that the pact must ebb and flow like tides. Yet balance can become stagnation. In Echo Reach, Thalen's heirs sang names into the labyrinth, weaving echoes into new stories. They believed belonging was the heart of memory, that the pact must be shared. Yet belonging can become illusion. And in Thornmere, Corin's own line carried the silver eyes, each child born beneath strange moons, each voice carrying echoes of the rift. They believed remembrance itself was the pact, that to forget was to die. Yet remembrance without change becomes burden. Generations passed, and the ninefold path became not only rhythm, but contest. The houses argued, the heirs quarreled, and the sigils burned brighter. Storms rose where flame and tide mingled, roots deepened where stone and thorn entwined, songs soared where wind and echo joined, dreams shimmered where moon and veil embraced. Iron stood apart, forging chains, seeking dominion. The world danced, but the dance became war. The sigil war began not with armies but with voices. Storm declared dominion. Dream whispered silence. Root demanded growth. Song cried memory. Iron roared conquest. The realms fractured once more, and the void stirred, feeding on silence, waiting for the moment when forgetting would triumph. Corin, ancient now, walked among them. His hair was white, his eyes silver still, his voice weary, yet strong. He reminded them of story, of Kalen's grief, Lys's truth, Neris's balance, Thalen's belonging, Alira's question. Few listened. Pride deafened them, ambition blinded them, fear silenced them. The rift trembled. Alira returned, not as woman but as echo, her voice carrying storms and silence. She warned that the pact's rhythm was fading, that the void would soon awaken. The houses gathered beneath the stars, each bearing their sigils, each carrying their pride. Corin sang the ninefold path, Alira sang the rift, Kalen's descendants sang stone, Lys sang wind, Neris sung tide, Thalen sung echo. Together they forged the starborn accord, a covenant of song and memory. The void listened. It did not vanish, but it paused. The stars brightened. The world sang. Yet even the accord was fragile. The void cannot be destroyed, only delayed. It waits in silence, in forgetting, in the spaces between stories. And so the ninefold path continued, not as road, not as law, but as endless rhythm. Corin became legend, Alira became myth, the companions became constellations. Children looked to the stars and saw their faces, their stories, their choices. The rift remained, the void waited, but the world danced, and the path continued. But the dance grew heavier. The accord held, yet cracks appeared. Storm sought to rule the skies, dream sought to silence memory, iron sought to bind all houses in chains. Root grew too deep, choking the land. Song grew too loud, drowning truth in echoes. The balance faltered, the rift trembled, and in the silence between stars, the void whispered again. It whispered not to Corin, nor to Alira, but to a child born in Iron Deep, a boy named Dareth, whose eyes were black as night, whose voice carried no echo, whose dreams were empty. He bore no sigils, yet the void marked him. He did not seek story. He sought silence. He did not seek memory. He sought forgetting. And the world trembled. Dareth walked the realms, not as ally, not as enemy, but as shadow. In Stonehold, he shattered runes. In Windspire, he silenced towers. In Tidewarrens, he stilled the sea. In Echo Reach, he erased names. In Thornmere, he burned roots. In Moonspire, he dimmed illusions. In Veilshade, he swallowed shadows. In Iron Deep, he forged chains of silence. In Flame, he quenched fire. The houses feared him, yet some followed him, weary of memory, weary of story, weary of burden. They called him the Hollow Child, the voice of forgetting, and the void listened, and the rift opened wider. Corin, ancient and fading, faced him. His silver eyes met Dareth's black gaze. His voice sang memory. Dareth's voice whispered silence. The world held its breath. The stars dimmed. The void stirred. Alira's echo returned, her voice storm and silence both. She asked again, if the pact was forged from one soul, what happens when another is born? Corin answered, then the story changes. Dareth answered, then the story ends. And the rift trembled, and the void waited, and the ninefold path stood at the edge of forgetting. The battle was not of swords, nor of armies, but of voices. Corin sang the stories of the houses, of Kaelin's grief, Lys's truth, Nerys's balance, Thalen's belonging, Alira's question. Dareth whispered silence, forgetting, ending. The houses listened, torn between memory and silence. Some chose story, some chose forgetting. The world fractured, the stars flickered, the void opened, and in that moment, Corin made his final choice. He did not sing of houses, nor of wars, nor of loss. He sang of Dareth. He sang of his black eyes, his empty voice, his weary soul. He sang his story not as enemy but as child. And the void listened, and the rift paused, and the stars wept. Dareth fell silent, his black eyes closed, his voice ended, but his story remained, and the ninefold path continued. Corin faded, his silver eyes dimming, his voice ending. Alira's echo lingered, her question unanswered. The houses stood, fractured yet bound, weary yet hopeful. The void waited still, patient, eternal. The world danced, heavy yet alive, and the path continued, endless, fragile, eternal.